Hey guys. Oh man. So I've had an interesting day. I forged most of the day. It's spring break right now, so I'm in school. Um, I'm using my lights for the first time, really, which is very exciting. I forgot to put the microphone on myself. I forgot to put the microphone on myself for the very first time. That was kind of cool. It's a cool experience. I'll tell you about it sometime. Um, I turned part of my forge to glass on accident. I set my improvised tabletop on fire. It was awesome. Basically, it's been a great day because that's what makes a great day, of course. But what I want to tell you about is the movie Raya and the Last Dragon, okay? That is a phenomenal movie. It's not a musical. It's not like a princess movie. It's which there's nothing bad with those, by the way. I absolutely love a lot of those, but it's its own style, is what I'm trying to say, and it's very cool. It's some of the best fantasy I've seen recently. That was very exact. Just kidding, it wasn't. But it's some of the best fantasy I've seen recently. It's so good. It's so good. I'd highly recommend it. I know it came out a little bit ago. I've been, putting together Happy Meals at work with, the Raya and the Last Dragon stuff on it. So I'm kind of late as far as watching this for the first time, but it's so good. And it has so many reasons it's good. It has some awesome storytelling, some of the best storytelling, some cool world building. Like, that world is just magnificent, an awesome monster, magnificent characters. It's just the aesthetic. They have multiple just like scenes and like outfits and things that are just, the aesthetic is immaculate. It's so good. So it's a great movie from that standpoint. But probably more on par with the rest of my channel was the fight scenes, okay? Oh my gosh. You guys, that's what a fight looks like. So I'm gonna kind of put its fights and its sort of military style to my world building criteria, or at least my fight criteria, and that is, are the weapons actually practical? Do they look like they have an intent to harm each other instead of just dancing around each other? Are they using real techniques? I guess, are they using techniques that make sense? Which there's pretty much no technique we can come up with these days that hasn't been done already at some time in history. So are they using real techniques? And are there actual consequences? Those are kind of my main things. So the weapons, she's using a Moro Kris and a chain whip that she uses kind of like a great sword. All three of those are real weapons, and she uses them well. And she uses the Moro Kris kind of like a long sword, and she uses that very well. So yeah, perfect for that. There were some people that were using these, they were interesting. They were like they were not super tall. They weren't really long as far as pole arms go, but they had like a sort of curved blade, and then they had very much a two-handed use shaft, but it was small enough that you could use it one-handed, and that made sense because the people that were using this were sometimes mounted. There were sometimes cavalry on giant cats, which was awesome. And so you want a one-handed weapon because it looked like you could thrust with it really well. Or when using it two-handed, and you get to see someone use it two-handed, and it is, I say get to because it's a pleasure to watch. It's amazing. She uses it for a lot more cutting actions. I don't really want to like spoil the whole movie, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm just going to be vague like that. That's one of my favorite types of weapons. There's a European equivalent of it. It's kind of like a late medieval glaive sort of thing, where it's like a long blade. Sometimes it looks like a 2 to 3 foot long blade, but with the shaft, it's overall a little bit shorter than the person using it. I think it's a very effective weapon, especially in the context of this world. Actually, like I said, they're cavalry sometimes, and there isn't a lot of armor being used. So a really nice little like blade that you can maneuver like crazy is really helpful. So the weapons. there are giant axes being used, but that's okay. It's kind of its own aesthetic thing going on for the people using them, if that makes sense. I do like that the axes overall are thinner in cross section. However, the entire axe is just so big that it is just thicker than could be used. However, the proportions of the axe are good because it's thin. A lot of battle axes you'll see in fantasy are just like these big thick bricks with like sort of a bit of a edge at the end, which is weird. But no, these ones, the entire thing goes into the edge, and that's how it should be. So that's all right. There was this one weird weapon that you see briefly. It's kind of like a mixture of an Egyptian kolpesh and a sickle, where it like comes up like that and then curves around and it almost meets. And that might be a real weapon from Southeast Asia, which is where all these weapons and forms and the style of the movie is from. Southeast Asia. I love that diversity in that fantasy. I think we should see more of that. But that might be a weapon that I'm just not aware of. It looked like it might have had an edge all the way around, so you could like kind of cut with it, but would do a lot of serious damage if you were able to hit someone with the point, but like the point was like closed off. So those are like my only two weapons that I thought were kind of weird, was the axe and that thing. But like you see dual wielded single edged short swords that are dual wielded correctly, which is exciting. You see multiple actual Moro Kris besides Raya's. You get to see Eskrima sticks. Okay, so Eskrima stick, I've learned this in my formal martial arts training, which was karate specifically, but we also learned this, which is Filipino, again, Southeast Asian. So Eskrima sticks, they could be used as the weapon themselves, like just the sticks, or you could apply the same principles to swords, and you see both, which is so cool, you guys. Oh man, this movie. So near the beginning of the movie, and I believe it was also in the teaser trailer, you see someone use these Eskrima sticks, and so they're dual wielded a lot of the time. And what's interesting, an aspect of dual wielding, is that you use short weapons for dual wielding. You don't use two swords most of the time, and there are reasons for that. It's just like you can have the extra mobility. If this was a sword, I couldn't twist them around each other, if that makes sense. Like I couldn't hit chamber. It's like there are a lot of moments when if it was a sword, just the technique wouldn't work. But just, oh my gosh, you guys. So you got to see some Eskrima stick action, which was cool, like as sticks. And then you see someone else later use these two single-edged short swords in the exact same way. So that was awesome. So I've gone over the weapons. The next thing would be the intent to harm each other. Okay, there are fight scenes that are completely driven by emotion, which is so cool. But they're using the technique, because you're used to a lot of people, like Star Wars Episode 6 comes to mind when Luke is just like sitting there hammering on Darth Vader with absolutely no technique at all. And it's like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful. But you get to see at least one fight scene that's like that, but with technique, which is scary. Like, it's so scary. It's just, the rage is awesome, which you don't expect to see in a cartoon. It's just really cool. So it's like, is there an intent to harm? Yes. They look like they're trying to cut each other's limbs off. They look like they're trying to actually hurt each other. And then in contexts in which they're not trying to necessarily fatally hurt each other, this is just anyone who fights in the movie. If they're not trying to fatally hurt each other, or like they're just trying to defend an area, they do that. They use non-lethal means effectively. And that's just so cool. So intent, yes, it does well in the intent. And I already kind of talked about this, but the technique is amazing, okay? It's like, if you have the intent, like the characters look like they have an intent to harm or accomplish their goal, in some cases being to train, or in some cases in this movie being to just deny an opponent of an area through non-lethal means. It's like, you have that with technique, and that is a magnificent fight scene, you guys. So good. And they have it. The technique is honestly my favorite part of the fights in this movie. Everything else has its ups and downs, but the technique in this is 10 out of 10, you guys. It looks like they know what they're doing. They look like real martial artists. And it's like even the builds of the characters, like they're kind of toned, but they're not necessarily super buff, except for the one guy. They look like martial artists. They're using the proper technique. They look like people who have trained in this thing and studied it for a long time. It's beautiful to watch. The fights do go on for a long time, but that's just kind of because I say long time. That means a long time for real life. As far as movie fight standards go, these fights are relatively short. But a real fight is very short. A real fight is a couple of moves, honestly. But they managed to have those movie fights and still make them be using technique the whole time. They still make it look believable, and that's awesome. Raya using her two-handed weapon, she's using it like a longsword, and she's setting up the guards and the structures that are required to be able to take a hit, and then put an attack out there, which is called a riposte. So boom, boom, like that sort of thing. It's flawless. It's beautiful to watch. And it's wonderful storytelling. So yeah, so there's the weapons, the intent, the technique, and the consequences. I will give this one some leeway on the consequences because it is a Disney movie. So you can't have Raya covering people in lacerations that a Kris would, because it is a Disney movie, and I feel that Disney is pretty good at tastefully pulling off this sort of fear of violence, but not actually showing a whole lot of gore, things that would scare little kids. So I'm not going to judge this one too harshly. What I will say is that things will happen in the fights in this movie that will knock someone over, or they look visibly dazed. They don't have the blood that would be coming from their, cuts on their faces and noses and mouths and things, but they react in ways in which it looks like there could be, if that makes sense. So that's something I really appreciate about this, is that it, like a punch or a kick, doesn't do nothing. But also at the same time, a punch or a kick doesn't do more than it would normally. Like, just for one example, I saw at one point someone does a roundhouse kick, and you hear that kick as a sort of like crazy finisher. I think like Chuck Norris made that famous, I don't know. But a roundhouse kick that's basically just using your shin as a rotating kick. I can't really show you, but that's okay. But in this one, it's like they're trying to pass the person, but then they use a roundhouse kick to get them where they want them to be and then attack them in other means. It's like little things like that. So it's like they don't exaggerate and they don't demean, I think I'm using that word right, any of the attacks. So that's pretty cool. So overall, completely overall, I would give this movie, I know I haven't been doing numbers up until now, but I would give this movie overall an 8 out of 10. That's because the weapons, there are only a couple of weapons that confused me. The fantasy weapons are cool and make sense. So yeah, the weapons are great. The intent is absolutely there. The techniques are absolutely there. And there are consequences for getting hit. Mind you, no one really gets cut or anything, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense given that they're using edged weapons, but that's okay because it's a Disney movie. So overall, I gave this movie an 8 out of 10, maybe like 8.5 to 9 out of 10. Holy crap, you guys. Like, if you want to see what a fight looks like, but like in a well done, drawn out way, that's what this is. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any other fights or movies that you want me to look at and think about and talk about, let me know in the comments. I just love this movie so much, and I'll see you guys next time.